you look at the system the way it is, and you think, okay, these people have to be smart. They're running a system, and these are the leaders, and this is what they're doing. No, they're not smart, and the system they put in place isn't doing well. And what do they do when it isn't doing well? They double down. So, if you want to really follow your heart's desire and practice caring medicine, you can't be in the institutions that exist right now. So you might want to, if you want to do medicine or healing, you might want to look into alternative things.
Hi, my name is Augustine Colebrook, and I'm the principal at Midwifery Wisdom Collective. I speak on this podcast about big picture political issues and the future of our profession.
Hey y'all, I am Jamara, and I'm a midwife. I'm also a birth justice activist, and this season I am looking forward to sharing stories of Black midwives and the communities they serve.
Hello, beloved birth community. I'm Angela Love, nurse midwife since 2004, preceptor, and mother. I have a home birth practice called Midwife Love and a national telehealth practice called Midwife RX. My mission is to keep birth choices available and to educate the next generation of midwives for our daughters and grandchildren. Matriarchy now.
I'm Layla Wyatt. I get to share with you the voices of student midwives from across the country and beyond. This season, we focus on those students who just graduated, are about to sit for the NARM, or did yesterday, and we get tips and tricks for you for what happens at the end of the student midwife journey.
How are you?
I'm good.
Where are you?
I look like I'm glowing like a pumpkin. I'm in Kanab, Utah.
Utah, okay. I like that area.
Mm-hmm.
Is it late there? Are you tired?
No, it's only 7:30. I drove down from central Utah the night before. I was in Idaho, and the day before that I was in Bozeman.
All good places. I've been following your journey.
Yeah, it's been great. I can't complain. I'm living the life people dream of. If some people dream of like living in a mansion and having manicures and pedicures all day long, but that's not me.
Adventure.
Yeah,
you're on adventures.
The beauty of the Western United States is beautiful. I'm sure the Eastern United States is pretty too, but the Western United States is just, I could just tootle around till there's no more tootling to be done, till the gas pumps are empty.
Well, it's good to see you. You look good, and I really appreciate you being willing to come chat with me.
Where are you?
I am in a spare birth room at a birth center in India.
India.
We have a lady.
Right.
Yeah. We have a lady in labor right now. So
it's tomorrow morning there?
It is tomorrow morning. Yes, I am officially in tomorrow. Yeah.
Yep. This is a time. It's a time warp we've got going on here because
seriously,
it's October 3rd for me and it's October 4th for you. You're looking into the past.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm looking into the future. That's kind of cool.
It's kind of cool. Well, let's do this. Are you ready?
Yeah, you know what? I don't even know what we're going to do, but I always wing it. And talking to you is easy. I remember the last time we talked, it was I think we had whiskeys or something in the bar at the MGM Signature. I think that was last time I saw you. Yeah.
Yeah, bumped into you in Vegas of all places.
Oh.
Well, that was a year ago, more than a year ago. And I'm so glad to see you again.
It had to be before that because it had to be almost before COVID, I think. Because what was I doing? What was I doing there? I didn't go.
You were at a friend's retirement party, or some friend was having a party, reunion, high school reunion, college reunion, something like that.
I don't know. I only usually go to Vegas to play poker once a year with my friend Lex from Minneapolis. And so, and then for 2 years we didn't go. Once they closed it in the second year, the year before last, you had to be vaccinated to play. And this year I went. So this year I got to go. But so it had to be like 2-3 years ago that we ran into each other.
Huh.
I can't imagine why I would have been there any other reason.
Well, I was only there last year delivering my second grandbaby. So I'm pretty sure it was last year, but it's
What
okay.
was I
Either
doing
way,
there?
it was some alternate universe. We saw each other. So there you go. Well,
Yeah, see it's a time warp. What's 1 year for you is 3 for me. I'm living a cat life.
I love that. Okay, slow it down. Slow it down. Go slow on the highway. Well, you're living van life. I mean, RV life, or what are you calling it these days?
We call it RV living. I'm living in the beast. It's the beast. It's a big square box, rectangular box, excuse me. And it's my second go around. I was traveling in April and May. I went all the way out from LA to North Carolina to the Outer Banks and back. And that was a bit of a disaster. I mean, I broke this and I broke that and I hit this and I hit that and I forgot about that. And this time it's a whole lot different. This time I'm sort of an experienced RV traveler and campground setter-upper and that sort of thing. So it takes me only like 10 minutes to set up camp wherever I go now. So it's pretty quick.
Yes. Well, Bliss is also living the van life. I lived van life in Hawaii in 2018, 2019. I built a tiny home out of a shuttle bus. And so I know that life you're living. It's super fun. Do you feel like you're going to land anywhere?
Yeah, I just bought a house here.
You did? Okay.
In Utah. Yeah,
right.
it's going to take a while to transition here, everything. But yeah, I'm really quite honest with you. I mean, people always wonder when I'm going to come back and deliver babies and stuff like that again. And I don't know that I want to be on call all the time. I mean, I'm much healthier and physically fit and feeling better. I mean, I got orthopedic issues like everybody my age, but I just feel better not being on call. I mean, I was on call for 40 years and I don't know that I could go back to doing that again. So it's a dilemma. I mean, I'm getting a lot of accolades and a lot of satisfaction from teaching, and I would never give that up.
Yeah.
But the freedom that this gives me away from the tyranny of medicine, which I don't know we'll talk about today or not, but the tyranny of the micromanagers and the regulators and stuff. Regulators just create things to regulate, and then they wonder why things are busted, and then they create more regulations to fix the first regulations that busted everything. So
it's an insane reality we're living in many ways.
Yeah, so it's really nice to be able to be sort of at a point in my career where I'm, I don't want to feel like I'm the grandfather. I think Michel O'Donnell is still the grandfather, but I'm getting to a point where I have a lot of gravitas, and I like that. And I think my time is probably better spent trying to change bigger things than individual birthing. And maybe I'm saying that selfishly because the idea of going back on call again.
I think that's okay. I think you're allowed to say that. I mean, like, I fully 100% support wanting to be off call for a bit. Okay. So, my sort of lead in, the first question that I want to ask you is, because you are at this point in your career where you can take stock, you can look back and you can really see what it's meant, where it's gone. Hindsight is such a fascinating thing. If you could talk to your younger self, or say, pretend Nathan Riley is that younger self of you, what would you say? What advice would you give? How would you talk to yourself at that stage, given the trajectory of your career?
Good question. I believe that if I talked to myself at a certain point in time before I entered medicine, I wouldn't enter medicine. So that's a huge statement right then and there. And the reason I say that is because, there are people that have a personality to be followers, and there are people that have a personality to be like shepherds, or doers, or leaders. And I don't know that I'm saying that in a way that's negative or positive. I'm just saying that medicine right now is filled with sheep. It used to be filled with shepherds. And I'm a shepherd type person, but you can't be a shepherd in medicine anymore because you're just a cog in the wheel. You're just an employee. You basically have to follow the company line or the the government line or your employer's line or your insurance company's line or your malpractice carrier's line or your partner's line. So you can't really, it's really difficult to do that. And I think that my generation, people went into medicine. One was to make money, no question about that. And that's gone because I don't think that doctors get rich anymore. And two, they did it so they could be captains of their own ship. You hung up your shingle, you built a practice. And then that sort of disappeared in the late 80s and early 90s here in California when managed care took over, except for a few of us unicorns like me and the partners that I had at the time. But as we retire, and people maybe 5-10 years less vintage than me stop practicing, everybody's going to generally be an employee, and that's the way it's going to work. So if I could catch before Nathan went to medical school, I would tell him not to go. All right. Once you get there, I would tell him to look at, you look at the system the way it is, and you think, okay, these people have to be smart. They're running a system, and these are the leaders, and this is what they're doing. No, they're not smart. And the system they put in place isn't doing well. And what do they do when it isn't doing well? They double down. So, if you want to really follow your heart's desire and practice caring medicine, you can't be in the institutions that exist right now. So you might want to, if you want to do medicine or healing, you might want to look into alternative things like naturopathic doctors or Ayurvedic medicine or midwifery, or even though they'll be sort of funneled along a path by the mainstream medical complex, it's still, you get to run your own show. There's no most naturopathic doctors I know have their own office. Most chiropractors I know have their own office. They still practice the way doctors used to practice, and not anymore. So I would say, do that. Or if you are going to follow the path of becoming, going to medical school and residency and stuff like that, you got to be able to find a way to ground yourself. Keep your feet on the earth. Keep your emotions in check, because otherwise you'll get indoctrinated and you'll become part of to quote a current term, you'll become part of the mass formation, and you'll find yourself doing things that if you actually stop to think about it, you think that that's crazy. Why would I ever do something like that? And yet I'm actively supporting a system that has a 30 to 40 to 70 to 80% cesarean section rate, depending on what country you're in, and thinking that that's an okay thing. So it's not a very optimistic, you asked me a question, it's not an optimistic thing that I would say to somebody who's younger. But the system will implode. It will implode on itself eventually. The question is how much damage will be done before it does that.
And how many years or decades before that happens, and how many people are caught in that, and how much does the consciousness change?
Yeah, it won't be in my lifetime, but it will be. Yeah. It has to change because the system just isn't
broken.
Yeah, it's broken. Sorry.
Yeah, it's broken.
So I don't know if that was the right answer. There's no right answer, but
there's no right or wrong answers. Yeah, because you have this vantage point, I kind of want to pick your brain of where you're sitting right now.
If you want to do something where you're in charge of your own life, medicine is not it anymore. Yeah. And you give up a lot to become a doctor. Essentially, I know it's a cliche, but I didn't have my 20s. I didn't have my 20s. From age 22 until 30, I was in training. So while other people were, going to concerts and partying and actually getting married and buying houses and doing all those things, we were accumulating debt, and we were working 120 hours a week and 40-hour days, if there's such a thing. And they've kind of changed that a little bit right now, but it's not for the better. And I think doctors coming out of training right now have very good academic skills, but not very good, necessarily great people skills or great surgical skills or those sorts of things, because there just isn't enough to be training, and it hasn't moved with the times. Where are people going to get the kind of training, Augustine, that I got when I was a resident at Cedars and spent 4 months at LA County USC, where we did everything. And that's why I still do what I do, is because I was lucky enough to be trained to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I've been looking back over 20 years. You've been looking back over 40 years. And I can say a lot has changed in 20 years. A lot has changed in 40 years. Can you name some of the things that, like you said, I got to do everything. I was trained in everything. What is it? Why is it so different? What looks so different? Like for folks that are just coming into the scene now and don't have that perspective, what's changed?
Well, again, everything has to follow the money. And it used to be that hospitals made a living on private insured patients and didn't want any government insured patients, Medicaid, we call it in the United States. And then insurance companies began to have managed care, and they began to diminish the reimbursements that they gave to doctors and to nurses and to hospitals and that sort of thing. And so in order to continue to pay your overhead, which continued to go up despite the fact that your revenue went down, you had to do more volume. And so what's changed to me is the idea that businessmen run medicine as a business. And you can see it reflected not only in the business part of it, but in the lack of caring, the lack of, they're very quick to come up with slogans like mother baby friendly. But the minute that mother baby friendly would interfere with the revenue generation, they're going to get rid of mother baby friendly. So I think that when medicine became a business, which really happened, I mean, it's been a business for a long time, but at least the people running the business were the people providing the service. Now, like anything else, anytime something gets bigger, you dissociate you break down the relationships between people. I mean, we used to be called doctors. Now we're called providers. That was intentional, to break down the doctor-patient relationship. And when people don't see the results of their work, when there's middlemen involved and regulators involved and administrators involved and stuff like that, there's more frustration in the job. So I think there's less job satisfaction in medicine. And then, of course, access to certain things like surgery and other things have changed. So there are, which is a good thing, by the way. A lot of things have been treated now non-surgically. So the surgical specialties are struggling. And the average OBGYN who finishes a 4-year residency isn't really competent in some of the things that maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we saw a lot of, because there aren't a lot of indications to do things like hysterectomies or, other those types of surgeries. I mean, certainly they're all competent in cesarean section, all right, but they're not competent in hands-on breech. And when, the things that you and I talk about all the time, breech and second twin breaches and extractions and forceps, there's no way anyone's going to get the training for that anymore, because there just isn't enough to do it, and everybody's afraid. When you put risk managers and administrators in charge of things, and their ultimate goal and their fiduciary duty is completely different than yours or mine. One of the things I talk about when I give my course is, when hospitals think they're being innovative by providing a doula service. So for women that don't have a doula, the hospital provides a doula. But who does the doula work for? Works for the hospital. If that doula contradicts what the nurse or doctor wants to do to that patient, that doula will not be working in the hospital's doula service for very long. Yeah. So the conflict of interest is when it's a business is detrimental. And I tell people all the time, never, ever let a loved one go to the hospital without a family member, just be with them 24/7.
Wow.
And what we saw with COVID, where, people were, old people were locked away to die by themselves, nothing could be more crueler than that.
Nothing.
So, well, and that's the heart, those are the people that are running the medicine, the people that let that happen, people that thought it was okay.
Yeah. Well, so midwives and birthing folks have opportunity to interface with docs, even if they're opting out of the system, because a certain percentage of people have to transfer. there's health issues, there's baby issues, there's timing issues, there's reasons why certain folks have to go to the hospital. So I would just sort of ask for your advice, your tricks or techniques. How can folks outside the system interact with the system when they have to? What's your best advice?
Well, I think it all boils down to relationships again. I mean, it's the human condition. If you have the personal relationships with certain people who work at the hospital, like some of the midwives in LA do and I do, there's certain doctors at certain hospitals who are either friendly toward us, or we've known them for years, or we've invited them to meetings, or we've taken them to dinner, or we've brought lunch to their office staff, or whatever. You develop relationships with people, because it is the interpersonal relationship. It's very hard to expect someone who's been indoctrinated to believe that pregnancy is an illness and home birth is horrible and midwives are awful and all that stuff, to suddenly take a transport and suddenly be nice. They've forgotten what their calling is, which is to take care of people who in need. And they're more worried about finishing their shift and getting home without any major problems on their shift, because medicine nowadays is a shift mentality. And it gets back to the whole thing about business running it. Our profession, obstetrics, or, I shouldn't even call it obstetrics. Birth working is probably a better term. Obstetrics is the medicalization of it. Birth working is not something that does well with the shift mentality, because it requires relationships. It's not like taking your appendix out. It's not like going to the ER with a broken arm, all right, and having a doctor set it and never seeing you again. My profession, one of the reasons I chose it was because it had what's called longitudinal care, and you get to know people over years and years and years and years. And your visits, my annual gynecology visits used to be more about, how's the family, what's the job doing, what's your latest movie. We didn't really have to get acquainted again because we knew each other. All over all that time. When you have a HMO type practice, you may have some of that, but most of the time people call up. If they can get in, they'll get in with the first doctor that's available. And it may be somebody you've never met before or don't know. And certainly in labor, you may love your doctor, but you have a 1 in 11 chance of having that doctor being the one on call the night you're in labor. This is not conducive to it. So it's relationships and developing them with the nursing staff, with the charge nurse in labor and delivery, with some of the OBs in the community. How do you do that? I quote you about breaking silos. And the only way to do that is to sort of have meetings where everyone's invited. And I don't know, the problem is if we sponsor it, if the home birth people sponsor it, doctors won't come. They just don't come. I mean, I teach breech and I'm so thrilled. Like I did a seminar in Kansas City last month and I had an MFM come.
Cool.
Yeah, it was like really cool. And she was really cool. She was really cool. I mean, obviously you have to be cool to want to come to that.
Yeah.
Because most people who are already out are not interested in learning a new skill, even if it might save a life at some point. And it would make them feel much more like an obstetrician than somebody who only can go to a scalpel when there's a problem. But back to your question, I mean, how do we do that in LA? Well, I'm lucky because I worked in the hospital for 25 years. Well, if you count connections in the hospital, in the medical community, and it was easy for me. And then I helped to liaise for a lot of the midwives to get to know some of the great guys that are still doing it. But they're either getting old or they've been forced out by their partners or even forced out by the hospital. There's a lovely doctor in Santa Barbara who was tremendous, who everyone wanted to go to, and she ended up not getting any support from the other doctors there and had to close her practice because she was getting harassed and unsupported, and you can't do that and live a life. So
well, speaking of being forced out, your friend and mine, Dr. Brad, got seriously forced out of his world. And that seems to be happening more and more.
I mean, it's amazing to me, and we don't have to go into any political aspect at all, but here's a maternal fetal medicine who's a Black man who's eloquently spoken. He's written a book, and he's former military. He's just like the dream. And they still chased him off staff because he supported midwifery and because he liked to do breeches and twins. And, it wasn't about outcomes. People, they'll gunny sack you. I mean, I don't know if your listeners know what gunny sacking means, but it means bringing back little teeny things and making a big file out of them. Like, oh, he spoke harshly to this nurse, or, oh, I know that I got written up once for wearing Cedar Sinai scrubs at a Camarillo Pleasant Valley Hospital delivery. And so the nurse wrote me up for that. And so they bring these things up, and then they get a file that's big, and it makes it look like to the layperson that all these complaints, but they're really, none of them are significant. And that's what they did. And, Brad is a gentleman, so he's not going to speak poorly of these people. No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, because he's obviously so well educated and such a good clinician, such a thinker, he's adapted and he's in some other pathway. But it's a travesty to the midwifery, to the birthing world, to have lost him at Atlanta. It's a travesty.
I know women from Florida who used to drive up to have him care for them. So think of the women of that whole area lost somebody who was actually good. We see this all the time. We see people fail upwards in academia and medicine and even politics and stuff like that. They do a crappy job and they end up get promoted. People leave government and they end up on MSNBC or on CNN or something like that with a job that pays more than their government job, which they were crappy at. And it's the same thing here. The doctors that run these programs, some of them, they're not bad people, but they're stuck in a system that they're so used to that makes it so uncomfortable when somebody like Brad comes along and does something different, or somebody like me came along, or David Hayes, or Anne Marie Adams, or some other bunch of other people come along, and we make them uncomfortable, and their cognitive dissonance solves that problem by belittling us or ignoring us or getting rid of us. That's just how people
and the system
in a system
rewards
like
the system rewards conformity. So it disincentivizes anyone from sticking their neck out. But those of you that do, like you suffer personally, all of you have, every name that you named has suffered in some way personally. But then the whole profession suffers when we lose those greats. And I would say a similar thing is happening in midwifery. 2 large birth centers closed in Washington State this year. New York State has lost a major birth center. We're losing senior midwives left and right because the whole system, is disincentivizes any kind of innovation, any kind of individual care. What are we going to do? What are we going to do as a nation? How are we going to reclaim that?
I think you're seeing the beginnings of it. That's why I said it's going to take a long time. But you're seeing the beginning of an alternative economy and an alternative way of doing things. And there will be people that will stick to that, and they'll hold on to that till the last brick falls because their system is okay. One of the other analogies that I use, Augustine, when I talk in my course, I talk about the World Health Organization, which is not an organization I'm very fond of. Okay. They say the C-section rate should be 10 to 15%. All right, let's just say 15%, and that's giving them the benefit of the doubt. And I know in the midwifery world, if you look at the midwives have lower risk clients, but the C-section rate in their clientele is anywhere from 2 to 7%. That same low risk cohort in the hospital is going to have a C-section rate of over 20%. So it's 3 times higher or more simply because of the model by which they're being cared for. But if the World Health Organization says that 15% of women should have C-sections, and say in the United States it's 30, we could talk about other countries where it's a lot higher, but let's just say 30 because it's an even number and it makes math easy. Okay. So that means half of all the C-sections being done in the United States are unnecessary. Well, there's about 4 million babies being born every year in the United States. So that means there's about 1.4 million cesarean sections at a 30+% rate. So that means there's 700,000 unnecessary surgeries being done every year on American women. And not only are if there were 700,000 unnecessary knee surgeries or mastectomies or anything else being done, not only would the people be an outcry about it, but the insurance companies would be an outcry about it because they're paying for this sort of stuff. But there's not a peep about this. But here's the real kicker. If half of all the C-sections being done are unnecessary in the United States, who's doing them? Who's doing the unnecessary C-sections? Because no doctor goes home at night and says, hey, honey, guess what? I did 2 unnecessary C-sections today. Every C-section a doctor does, he thinks is necessary, yet half are unnecessary. So who's doing them? Oh, the other guy's doing them. But the other guy's saying that you're doing them. So that's classic cognitive dissonance. You can't, if you actually take a step back and look at that, it cannot stand. And yet it's the norm, and it's what they're fighting to keep, a system like that. And they're demolishing anybody who challenges it, which is exactly what people do in a mass formation. And mass formation has become, I don't know if you've heard the term.
I know the term.
I'm reading a book by Matthias Desmet. He's the guy that came out with this whole thing about the COVID thing, and how people were snitching on other people, and how family members turned on family members, and how it was the unvaccinated were vilified and all that stuff. And how do you do that? Because you're turning on your loved ones who just made a decision with you, but their decision makes you so uncomfortable that you're willing to sacrifice your own values for the collective. And that seems to be what's going on in medicine now, because the outcomes we have in this country suck. They suck. If you know what, if the medical model was actually having good outcomes, okay, so they're treating women badly and the C-section rates, but with all that being said, the outcomes still suck. I know that's a blunt word, but I could say it in a nice way.
It's a great word. We can use any number of swear words. It's fantastic.
Well, suck is not a swear word.
Well, okay, sorry. In 8-year-old vernacular, it is. So I like it. I still like calling it a swear word.
Well, it's not one of the words that the FCC would ban you from on public airwaves. Okay.
Okay. Well, we're not public here. We can do whatever.
I know. We could use a lot of other 4-letter words and be fine. I know.
Well, so what are we going to do, Stu? What are we going to do? What is next? Do we just wait for the whole thing to crumble?
No, we're doing what we can do. Ideally, what we really need there's enough good people out there who want to start an alternative type thing for birth. I mean, the bigger whole medical thing that's the idea that we treat everything with a prescription, and that we don't treat any people with, healthy living and healthy diet and healthy exercise and getting outside and keeping, getting your feet dirty and getting your hands dirty, and we Purell everything and we bubble wrap everybody. And that's another story. But for birthing, what we need we need rich people because, if Bill Gates or George Soros or any of these multi-billionaire people, even Elon Musk, wanted to really do something good for the world, it would be to change the way we give birth. And they could, not all this monkey business with GMOs and viral manipulation or banking manipulation or monetary manipulation or whatever they're doing for the megalomaniac itching that they have going on, would be to help support an alternative system that develops where we start with, a small thing like a retreat center, like Maren Green from Indie Birth and Nathan, and you're on that thing. I don't know if you were at the meeting recently. I was on the road. I was on the road. I couldn't get Wi-Fi in Idaho. But that's the kind of thing that needs to be, for people that are listening, what we want to do is we want to open up a retreat center, a sanctuary type place where people can come and stay if they have to come for 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and stay from other places where they don't have choices, and be taken care of by traditional midwifery school midwives who are passing on those traits and that knowledge, and also having place where maybe we could do breaches and twins in a setting with a collaborative relationship with a local hospital or something, but actually doing these things outside of the hospital so women can birth as nature intended and as how every other mammal does it, which is safe, quiet, and unobserved. where they're free to move about, they're free to eat, they're free to drink, they're free to have people in the room that they want and not be interrupted when they don't want to be. And, babies come out. And, if you leave birth alone, people always ask the question, and you've asked it of you too, is what if this happens, or what if that happens at a home birth? And it's like, well, that's because you're describing what happens so often in the hospital.
Yeah.
Because of the meddling that goes on in the hospital.
Yeah.
If you don't starve a person, if you don't immobilize a person, if you don't numb her with an epidural, if you don't hyperstimulate her uterus with oxytocin or Cytotec, if you just leave, if you leave them to nature's way, you don't see that sudden rapid deterioration of the fetal status.
Yeah.
There was Bliss and I just reviewed a 2019 YouTube video by a guy named Z-Dog MD. I don't really know who he is, but apparently he's fairly popular. He's got a lot of followers on Instagram, and it was a thing they did on home birth. And I looked at it, and it was incredible how backwards these two guys, and how scared they are about birthing, and how differently they see it.
Yeah.
And how little they really know. And yet they're because they have MDs behind their name, they're considered experts.
Yeah. I've seen that. I know it's amazing how ignorance kind of has owned the airways, in so many different areas, education, food, security, all these things. But in the birthing world, it's like the loudest voices have the least accurate information.
Yep. And then they call you, they basically call you as a giver of misinformation. I mean, look at California just passed a law. The governor signed it yesterday, which makes saying something like hydroxychloroquine might be good for COVID, or the vaccine is for, especially for certain age groups, is probably far worse than the disease. For that, I can lose my license in California now.
I know.
That.
I read that.
But yeah, I'm fortunate though, because I'm at a point in my career where the only thing that would happen is if California took away my license, is it would stop me from actually doing deliveries, which I may voluntarily anyway, but it would free me to be as loud as and boisterous as I would like to be, because I have no masters. It's one of the reasons I can talk like I do now, because I don't have an employer, and I don't take insurance, and I don't, I don't have those things that limit people. Why did so many of my colleagues, in order to keep their job, go get vaccinated? And why did ACOG and so many of my colleagues say that the vaccine is safe and effective for women, for pregnant women? They would tell pregnant women to stay away from secondhand smoke, but they'll tell them to inject something in their body. And I'm not even talking about the flu or the Tdap vaccine. It's bad enough, but they're telling them that the COVID vaccine is safe. It was never tested. It was known back then. They can't say that, well, we were told by Pfizer it was tested. No, you were never told that. And the data is clear now and they're still promoting it. UCLA still sends out weekly announcements on Wednesday, and they're promoting, and now they're going off onto monkeypox. So you got to get your monkeypox vaccine. Why do they do that?
It feels like we're in a conspiracy theory, like for real. Like it's very easy to see why people go off the deep end believing that like there's some nefarious plot happening, because like it feels crazy. Don't you feel like it's a little crazy? Like the speed with which things are changing?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I got ghosted by some midwives in England because I had the audacity. And again, I was probably, I shouldn't have gone there, but they asked me a question that led me there. And I had the audacity to say that women give birth. Okay. And I got ghosted. All right. Because, people with the capacity to get pregnant, according to the Harvard lawyer speaking to Congress, is a way to describe. And so Josh Hawley says, "You mean women?" And she goes, "That's violence. You just executed violence against me by saying that." And so I would ask the Harvard lawyer, who said it's a person with the capacity to give birth or to get pregnant. Does that mean menopausal women are no longer women? Does that mean a woman who's had a tubal ligation is not a woman? Did she even think it out? Do they think what's beyond stage 1 thinking. Do they ever do stage 2 thinking? No, they don't. Because they do what feels good and sounds good.
We're in a really interesting place globally, even.
It's going to collapse, though. People who are listening, don't worry. They'll soon start to, they're already doing it, but they're going to eat their own. And eventually they will all collapse. And we'll just look back.
Cancel culture will eventually cancel itself.
It's already on the downside. I know big tech is big in censorship and stuff like that. That's going to collapse too. There's going to be an alternative economy that comes out. There'll be other platforms, Rumble, other platforms that are going to come out. And those ones will collapse. And people who want to believe in that stuff will just go to them. Just kind of like now, people watch Fox News or they watch MSNBC, and nobody watches both. So
I like to watch both,
and we'll get better.
I like to see both sides. But you said something interesting. I want to go back to.
You're a sick puppy, right? You're sick.
I like balanced opinion. Come on now. Well, I like to make my own mind up. Well, here's what you said something really interesting that I want to go back to it, and that is like I have no masters, and that's a particularly interesting phrase given that we're kind of in this neo-feudalistic society now. Like we're no longer a democracy. We're not even an oligarchy anymore. It's kind of like this neo-feudalism where we have lords and there are these tech giants and all of that. And so I wonder, well, first of all, I love the phrase, and I wonder if that's how a lot of midwives feel as well. Like that's why they are running their own businesses, and they're sort of outside. They don't have anyone saying you can or can't do this, but the states keep trying to pass more laws that regulate what we do, what we don't do. And the one that I think you and I really laugh about a lot is like this idea of outlawing breach, like as if the baby were going to read the law book, like you cannot outlaw breach, especially since 34% of them aren't even diagnosed until labor. So like, tell me what your opinions on this.
Well, midwives unfortunately do have a master, and the master is causing midwives to do things that's outside their comfort zone, because they would never do things like start sweeping membranes and talking castor oil at 42 weeks or 41 weeks and 5 days and that sort of thing. And when we say governments are doing something, we're actually giving a pass to the people that are really doing it. Because the people that are elected to government office, and this is not meant to, it's going to come out funny, but it's not meant, they don't know anything. They don't know anything about medicine. So who do they go to?
Yeah.
They go to the chairman of the department at Stanford, or the chairman of the department at Cedars, or whatever else. And they, whatever that expert says, whatever that Dr. Fauci says, that's what they do.
Yeah.
So we can all
Subject
use
matter experts.
These people are basically Dr. Fauci's. They give their opinion, and they expect their opinion to then become a policy. That's right. They expect their opinion to become policy. You should never put experts in charge of anything. The problem is,
That's a great quote. That's a great quote. Should never put experts in charge of anything.
No, experts are very, very narrow. They can't look at the bigger picture. Let's lock down the world. Oh, that was a good call. All right. What about the economy? What about depression? What about grandma dying by herself? What about, I'm going to go off on a tangent. I don't want to go off on that tangent. The power behind the laws that restrict what midwives do and give them their master, that's their master, is coming from organized medicine.
Yeah.
It's coming from the American Medical Association. It's coming from ACOG. These guys are not an academic beneficent organization. These guys are an industrial lobby. They're an industrial lobby. They're no different than big pharma. They're just smaller than big pharma, but they're no different than big pharma. They're lobbying for more control, power, and money of their own profession. And they consider midwifery to be a subset of their profession, a lesser subset.
Or competition. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're stamping out their competition. Yeah. In some states, they're stamping out their competition. In some states, they're saying, how dare you? You work for me.
Either way, they rationalize why they should be the ones in charge, even though they don't look at their own house and discover that their house is not in order. I mean, this guy on this Z-Dog interview, he said the number one cause of death in children is perinatal mortality. And he says that's obviously home birth. That's what he said. Okay.
What?
Now, home birth is 1.5% of the births in the country. Okay. The crappy statistics we have in the United States and the NICUs that are filled with babies that weighed 8 pounds that came in the hospital inside their mothers in perfect health and ended up in the NICU are not because 1.5% of women are having their babies at home. And yet it's a perfect foil for them to just use to deflect the attention away from how crappy there is. It's sort of that pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. I am the great
smoke and
boss.
mirrors.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there is this sort of cultural gaslighting happening. I don't know if you remember Dr. Amy, who was vehemently. Yeah, I know. I always wondered too, but she was certainly the taste du jour for a while there, vilifying midwives. There was when I lived and practiced in Oregon, there was a site that was developed to track and publicize all of the investigations for all of the midwives in Oregon. Did you ever see this?
No.
So it had every state licensed midwife and people that randomly they decided were also midwives. I don't know, unassisted birthers or doulas or people that came onto their radar. And then they would put like a red dot next to their name for how many investigations they were. And you could click on it and go read the state files or the news article, or like they did this extensive research to try to vilify home birth midwives. And she was also a part of that, like incredible, like vehement, angry mob against home birth.
Well, and yeah, not only that, but her points were misguided. I'll use that term. They were misguided.
Being PC.
What?
Being PC. You're trying to be politically correct.
I rarely am PC. I mean, she was wrong on just about everything she did, but she did it in such a malicious way and an authoritarian way. Like, I am a doctor, but if you look into her history, which we don't have to spend any time talking about her, she's irrelevant.
Yeah, totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
But discredited all the way around. But again, that very loud mouthpiece, right, could capture lots of attention and create all this ruckus. And so I've been saying for a long time now, like, where are our disruptors? Like, I want to see our loud mouth spoken people. You're one of them. You're out there disrupting some of the system.
You think so?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do. I think everyone knows Dr. Stu, and everyone has knows that you're kind of pushing back against some of the systemic injustices and some of the systemic rhetoric that's not really true. Like, you don't have to be on your back. You don't have to have a cesarean breach and all this.
If anything, I feel like I'm a flea on a dog's back, but you know what? It's
a big system. I know.
Yeah. I mean, I do what I think is honest and truthful. And you know what? I would never be afraid to sit on a stage with She Who Shall Not Be Named, or the two guys that used to be from Cornell, Chervenak and Grunbaum, or any of these guys. They will never sit on a stage with me, and they'll say, well, we wouldn't, he's irrelevant. He got kicked off this and he did that and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And so they won't, they'll always, that's classic cognitive dissonance, is to belittle the side that you don't agree with. So they'll always come up with that. And so they'll never debate you. They'll never sit down and have a discussion. Wouldn't it be nice? By the way, whether you're a Trump fan or a Biden fan, it doesn't matter. Wouldn't it have been nice for the president of the United States, whoever he was, to get Deborah Birx and Tony Fauci and Robert Malone and Peter McCullough and Jay Bhattacharya, on a stage for a 2-hour Q&A on primetime television?
Yes.
Why didn't we see that? Because they knew that they couldn't
destroy the
their
narrative.
position.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the same thing that's happening in medicine, right? Like that's the same reason why the researchers of the ARRIVE study would never sit and talk with you, because it would destroy their bottom line, right? It would destroy their.
Yeah. And you know what? It's the interesting thing is like the Robert Malones and Peter McCulloughs, they'd be happy to get on stage with these guys.
I know.
It's the guys that are making the policy because they've been designated experts. And remember what I said, you should never let an expert run anything. They're there for their expert advice. But why is their expertise any better than anybody else's expertise who happens to have the same or better? I mean, Fauci's not a virologist. Fauci's a bureaucrat. Right. He's been he's not even a doctor. When was the last time Tony Fauci actually sat across the room from a sick person, as a patient? They don't.
Yeah.
So everything about the system is wrong and upset and broken. That's why when you get back to the question about what Marin and Nathan and stuff, and you and Bliss and even me want to do is we want to do something outside the system, and we're going to have to find a way to do it outside the legal system and outside the government system, because the government will come and try to quash you and squash you. And smush you.
I know it's crazy, and it's part of the reason why I don't live or practice in the U.S. anymore, is because I was squished. I was one of those squished bugs. I'm officially the most investigated midwife in all of Oregon.
You had more red dots than anybody else?
Yes. Can you believe it?
Oh, wow. It's a badge of honor. By the way, they would never do the same thing for physicians.
No, never.
No. Right.
Protect your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
If you ever studied like narcissistic abuse, the entire medical industrial complex is a narcissist, and it uses all of the same tools as narcissism, like gaslighting, like word salad, like changing the narrative. All of these things are happening on a global public, scale. The number of people that are gaslit in their birth experience, that to me is the foundation of obstetric violence, is being told things that just really we all know are not true.
Yeah, here's a way for your listeners to figure out how something's not true. First of all, if the government sponsors something and it has a really nice name, then it's completely false. Like the Affordable Care Act, or the Inflation Reduction Act or whatever. And then secondly, if one of the rules I talk about is if something ends in an even number, like a perfectly perfect number, that's bullshit too. That's completely false. Yeah. Like 24 hours of ruptured membranes, age 35, 6 feet apart. Anytime they come up with something that has a number like that, they made it up, because nature doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Bacteria and viruses don't know 6 feet. All right.
No, they know the Fibonacci sequence. Actually, if we could start talking about that, then we can maybe get somewhere. Well, I really love
Fibonacci sequence. That's something off of the Da Vinci Code or something like that.
Yeah, we'll go into quantum mechanics next. Well, okay. I really appreciate talking with you so much. And as we wrap up, I have a couple last questions. My first question for you is, looking back, would you do anything differently? Would you change the trajectory?
Yeah. Well, I told you I would probably be a forest ranger is probably what I would have done.
Okay, let's say you're already in medicine. What would you do?
Well, another Stuism that I like to tell people, that my kids don't listen to me very much, and they didn't do this on purpose, but I always told my kids, obviously what every parent tells their kids, please find a job that you really love doing. But secondly, make sure you're not licensed by the state to do it. And
mic drop. That's powerful. Okay.
No, because if say I went with my daughter, just say I went someplace and had a couple glasses of wine and got pulled over on the way home and was 0.08 or whatever it was. So I was over the legal limit. I could lose my ability to make a living. I'd take my license away. But if you work for Nordstrom's, if you work in the entertainment industry, if you work at a restaurant, you get a DUI, but you go back to work the next day. Your life goes on because the government doesn't have any control over you. And when you're licensed, the government can decide whether or not you have the ability to continue to do your thing. And like they said, if you don't get vaccinated, you lose your job. If you don't do this, we're going to raise we can raise your I pay $800 and some every year for my California license, every year, every other year. I don't remember. If they charged $8,000, I'd have to pay it.
Yeah. And they did.
Because
in Oregon, the recertification fee was $2,000 when I was
for midwives.
Yeah.
Who make nothing.
Yeah. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I know.
And they told us the reason why the price was so high is because we had to pay for our own investigative process.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we do too.
So the doctors rose up, came together. There was this incredible meeting in Sun River, Oregon in 2004, 5, 6, 2006. And the then president of ACOG in Oregon was Dr. Peter Palacio, I think. And he passed out at the ACOG meeting in Sun River the form for how to complain against home birth midwives. And after that, our investigations went tripled in 1 year. Yeah.
California.
And then our price went up. Our price for licensure went up.
Think about this: the California Medical Board is in the Department of Consumer Affairs. So in other words, it's supposed to be a watchdog to protect consumers from doctors. But who pays for investigations of doctors?
Yeah.
Shouldn't it be the consumers who are the taxpayer? No, that's what your licensing fees for. And when you're accused of something by the medical board, a lot of times you'll end up settling for something like a letter of reprimand or something like that. And if you settle for anything, then they send you a bill for the cost of their legal stuff.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
So crazy.
Talk about, one of the things one of the basic tenets of medical ethics is that coercion is never acceptable. And yet coercion is their number one tool. It's the number one tool.
Again,
it's a violation of every,
right? This is exactly what I'm talking about. They say one thing and they do the exact opposite.
Yep.
It's crazy. Well, so would you do anything different if you were, if
sorry,
you looked back?
I got off track. You mean where in my career would I have chosen obstetrics? Probably not. I would have chosen something that had a better lifestyle, like radiology or dermatology or.
I was going to say dermatology.
I would have but when you're young and energetic and naive, you look at that and you think, God, this is the greatest thing, catching babies and helping young healthy people change their lives and stuff like that. That was a great reason why I went into it. But you don't think about hours and liability and reimbursement and that sort of thing when you're young, and it's probably a good thing, or no one would do certain jobs. Augustine, nobody when they're 5 years old and, hey, Billy, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a hospital administrator. Okay. Nobody says that. So how do they end up doing hospital administration? Maybe somebody says that, but I would tell you that it's very rare to say that. But, they want to be an astronaut. I want to be a cowboy. I want to be blah, 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 ballerina. But nobody says I want to be a DMV supervisor. All right. So I would probably have picked a different specialty if I was going to go into medicine.
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't be me.
Yeah.
So
everything
that's happened to me to this point has got me to this interview with you right now.
Yeah.
And, you look back on some of them things and you say, God, I wish I would have done that different. Or I wish you look back at your relationships, your marriage and other things, and you think I could have done things differently. But you have to judge people in the time in which they live. This is the big mistake we make about tearing down statues and other things about people because they lived in a different era than ours. And I jokingly say, they want to tear down Thomas Jefferson statues because he owned slaves. And I would say 100 years from now, they'll tear down Barack Obama statues because he smoked cigarettes. All right.
Right.
Or because he ate meat. That's what's, if you don't, so you have to judge yourself and be kind to yourself and judge yourself in the time that you lived, and what you knew then, what you know now, you couldn't possibly have known then, because that's how age goes, and getting wiser. And hopefully some people get wiser. Some people don't. They don't evolve. They stay the same all the way through. And
it's true.
It works for them because they're in cognitive dissonance. They're in their mass formation. But that's what I don't, I guess I wouldn't have gone into OB. And if I had already chosen to go to medical school, I think I would have picked something easier, but I still would have been a cog in the wheel. I would have ended up by this point in my career, probably selling my practice to an HMO. It's really interesting. This is a sort of a cynical thing that I mentioned Lex earlier. He's the guy that I used to go play poker with, or I still go play poker with. He sold his practice to a big company at HMO maybe 20 years ago. And at the time he got a nice windfall. So it was a good deal for him. But then, I would talk to him every year, and he would tell me that, it's getting like drudgery. I have to be told how to do things by the people that you and I used to tutor in math. So, because the people that were the business majors when I went to college were the people that couldn't get into medical school or law school or dental school or whatever. And they went into business school. Now the business school people are running the world, and they're telling my friend Lex how to run his practice. And that was really annoying to him. So even if I would have gone into dermatology or radiology, I would have ended up working for some big company. I would have sold out, and then I would have been grumpy, and I probably would have retired by now. People think that I'm retired because I'm on sabbatical, and I may retire from birthing. I don't know, but I'm not retiring ever until I can't speak anymore or can't get around or I'm drooling.
You had too much to offer. Well, so speaking of which, tell us what you're doing right now. Reteach the Breach is on tour, right? You're going from city to city. What's your next few spots?
Well, that's part of what I'm doing. I'm headed from I came down to Utah because I'm buying a house here, and I'm going to sign papers tomorrow, excitingly. And then I'm going to go to Fort Collins, Colorado to teach, then off to Austin and then Dallas. And that'll be the end of 12 Reteach Breach seminars I did in 2022, which made up for the fact that I did 0 in 2021 because nothing was open. and you couldn't hold those sorts of things. And in 2020 as well. And I'm going to continue to do those. I also have like a consultation service where people can, who want, first of all, midwives can use it they can sign up for a certain fee, and then I'm at their beck and call 24/7 for a year at a time to either answer questions or call in prescriptions or that sort of thing. So, it's nice to have people who can't get a doctor. I'm not saying that this is not a supervisory role for people out of state, but it is something where they can call a doctor and ask a question about something that they're concerned about. So I have that service. And then I have a consultation service where people for a certain fee can sign up, and I give them an hour on Zoom. And then I have a one question thing, which is by email, that sort of thing. So that's how I'm sort of generating, and I'm writing. I'm working with Rixa, the founder of Breach Without Borders, and we're working on we wrote a breach paper in 2018. Now we're working on a twin paper, home twin birth. I have 100 sets of twins, and we're going to analyze that because there aren't any papers in the world on home breach or home twin by a single practitioner with certain protocols and that sort of thing. So you can actually see, because all the papers on this stuff are either retrospective reviews of birth certificate records or mishmashes of people reporting or not reporting. And you don't even know whether they're, whether there's a home breech birth, was it planned or unplanned? What was the level of skill of the practitioner? What was the position of the baby? You don't know any of that stuff. So we're trying to get some data out there in the world. And then Bliss wants to write a book. And of course, I'm still podcasting every week. Bliss wants to write a book on this topic, sort of what's the next iteration of birthing to get back to where we have really understand that birthing isn't always about, as my students will say, a live baby in the bassinet. It's about, the journey does matter. And what we do to these women, how many women are scarred? How many women have bad memories of their birth? They love their children, but the memory of their birth will haunt them their entire life because they were mistreated or because they were misdiagnosed or they had too many interventions for no reason. So Bliss wants to, she'll get me to do it. She motivates me.
Yes, she's very, very persuasive in that way. Well, I love that you're doing all these things. We certainly want to have you at next year's Midwifery Wisdom Experience. Hope we can steal you away for that.
I'll talk to you about that off record.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thanks so much for being here and for chatting and talking up a storm. I appreciate you so much, and I send you so much love on your travels, safe travels, and I hope to see you soon. Bye, friend.